In the summer of 2017, I would have done anything to get a Nintendo Switch. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't get my hands on one. To make things worse, one of my friends managed to snag one, and I was suffering from some major FOMO. He kept texting me about how amazing the console was and how Breath of the Wild was the best game he'd ever played. I became desperate to get one myself. I spent hours refreshing tracking sites to see if any stores nearby had restocked. Then, one night, just as I was about to lose hope, I refreshed one last time, and there it was. A Walmart in Janesville, Wisconsin, had just restocked. I called the store immediately and asked if they could hold one for me. The employee on the other end told me it was first come, first served, and that they only had 2 consoles left. There was a chance they'd be gone before closing at 11 p.m. Janesville was about 90 minutes from where I lived, and at the time of the call, it was already 9:05 p.m. I could either wait until the morning and hope they'd still have stock, or I could drive over right then, getting there just before they closed and pray a console was still available. Almost immediately, I decided I was going that night. I hung up, dashed to my car, and took off. About half an hour into the drive, I noticed something that almost made me lose control of the wheel. My phone was nearly dead, and I hadn't brought a charger. I had never driven to Janesville before and was using my phone's GPS. Just 2 minutes later, my phone died, and I was left with no idea how to get there. I pulled over at the nearest gas station, hoping the attendant could give me directions. The man at the counter was older, with a name tag that read, "Hi, my name is George." I asked George for directions to Janesville, and he grinned, revealing a gap-toothed smile as he scribbled directions on a notepad. As he wrote, his tongue kept slipping out of the side of his mouth, licking his lips. "Just follow this," George said in a high, shaky voice. "It'll get you exactly where you need to be." "Thank you so much," I said, grabbing the paper. His grin widened, and the fluorescent light above him flickered. I waved and hurried out, feeling a bit uneasy but eager to be back on the road. Following George's directions, I found myself off the highway and on isolated back roads. But having never been to Janesville, I figured this might be where the GPS would have taken me anyway. I pressed on, hoping for the best. My car's clock read 10:37 p.m. when I arrived at what I thought was Janesville. Plenty of time to get to Walmart. But as I passed the town sign, my heart sank again. The sign didn't say, "Welcome to Janesville, Wisconsin." Instead, it said, "Welcome to Kangaroo, Wisconsin." I double-checked George's notes, wondering if I'd somehow made a mistake. I'd followed the directions perfectly, but I'd never even heard of Kangaroo, Wisconsin. I felt a flush of frustration. George had played some kind of trick on me, and now it seemed likely I wouldn't make it to Janesville in time. I slammed my fist on the steering wheel, considering turning back, but I decided to drive around Kangaroo. Maybe the town had its own Walmart, or maybe it was just outside Janesville, and I was closer than I thought. The first thing I noticed about Kangaroo was how unnervingly quiet it was. I was from Madison, not a huge city but big enough to have some noise, even late at night. Here, there was nothing. No yelling, no doors slamming, not even dogs barking or crickets chirping. It was dead silent. As I drove further into the town, I eventually spotted a diner. Seeing it made my cheeks burn again. The place was called George's Diner. I tried to laugh it off as a coincidence. A red neon sign over the door read, "Open 24 hours, flickering as if it might go out any second. Through the diner windows, I could see a waitress at the counter and a man in one of the booths. It was 10:48 p.m., so I decided to go inside and ask if anyone could tell me how far Janesville was. When I walked through the doors, a dull bell gave a soft ring. I rubbed my eyes, unable to believe what I was seeing. I felt a scream bubble up in my throat, but I stifled it with a nervous cough. There were only 2 people in the diner, except they weren't people. They were mannequins, the kind you'd see in a department store. From the outside, I hadn't been able to tell through the foggy windows, but there was no mistaking it now. The mannequin at the counter was dressed in a blue waitress uniform, and the one in the booth wore a driver's jacket and faded jeans. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing past the lifeless mannequins. Is anyone here? There was no answer. I walked over to the mannequin in the booth and, to my surprise, noticed that he had a real cup of coffee. Steam was still rising from it, as if it had just been poured. The mannequin sat there silently, one frozen hand on the coffee mug, as if about to take a sip. Hello? I called again, looking around. I was getting the urge to check the kitchen when I heard a noise. I turned toward the counter where the waitress mannequin stood. At first, everything looked as it had when I walked in, but then I noticed something that made me scream. Her head had turned to face me. I heard another noise and quickly looked back at the mannequin in the booth. He was still seated, but his head was now facing in my direction. No way, I whispered in a breathless voice. When I glanced back at the waitress mannequin, she was closer to me now, as if she'd taken a few steps in my direction, but froze when I looked at her. The mannequins were moving, but only when I wasn't looking. I heard the creak of a seat, the unmistakable sound of someone getting up from a booth. I knew it was the driver mannequin, and when I turned to look, he was standing. I stood just outside his booth, holding my coffee mug in one hand. My arm twisted back oddly, like I was about to throw a fastball. A sound came from behind the counter, and I thought I heard something from the kitchen, too. Instead of checking, I ran out of the diner. As I reached the door, I heard the mug shatter against it behind me. Halfway to my car, I turned back. Both the server and the driver were standing frozen at the diner's entrance. The server's hand was outstretched, as if calling to me, their pale mannequin-like faces eerily blank. The red glow of the neon sign bathed them in an unsettling light. I turned away, got into my car, and when I looked up, they were no longer at the door. Through the fogged-up diner windows, I could see them again. The driver was back at his booth, and the server stood behind the counter, holding a phone to her ear, her lifeless eyes staring out the window, her mouth frozen. I started the car and drove, trying to find my way out of town. But the more I drove, the more lost I felt, like the town was a maze. It was dead quiet, and as I passed houses and buildings, I saw mannequin-like faces in the windows, white and still. Turning a corner, a chill ran through me. Two mannequins stood under a streetlight, one in a red shirt, the other in blue. Neither was facing me. They looked like two men just standing there. Just keep your eyes on them, don't look away, I told myself. But then I heard footsteps rushing towards my car. I glanced at the driver's side window, and there was a mannequin, arm raised, holding a hammer as if ready to smash the glass. It was frozen, but if I had been a moment later, the window would have been shattered. More footsteps echoed from where the mannequins under the street lamp had been. I floored the gas, not daring to look away from the hammer-wielding mannequin until I had sped around the corner. When I looked back in the rearview mirror, I felt a chill. One mannequin lay sprawled in the street, the one with the hammer standing over it, and the one in the red shirt staring after me as I drove off. They weren't alone. Mannequins filled the street, frozen in mid-run, some emerging from the shadows of trees like they had been waiting there all along. I kept driving. There is no such place as Kangaroo, Wisconsin. That's what I learned when I finally got out. It was like a cursed maze, with mannequins at every turn, until I finally made it back to the highway. No search results exist for Kangaroo, Wisconsin, and nobody I've spoken to has ever heard of it. But I know I was there. I know it exists. I threw away the directions George had given me right after I got home. George was the only person I knew who wanted to know about Kangaroo. A few days after my experience, I finally gathered the courage to talk to him. When I walked into the gas station, this time during the day, George wasn't at the counter. Instead, there was a girl with a name tag that read, "Hi, my name is Sally," and an older man named Mark. "Can I help you?" Sally asked as I approached the counter. "Hi," I said, trying to sound normal, wiping the sweat off my forehead. Even being back in the gas station made me anxious. "Is there a George who works here?" Sally looked confused. Not that I know of." I turned to Mark. "No," he said, not looking up from an inventory sheet he was marking. I felt a chill. "Are you sure?" I asked. "He's an older guy with a raspy voice." Mark looked up from his clipboard. giving me a look that made it clear he thought I was the most annoying person in the world. "Buddy, I'm the manager here. I handle all the hires, and I've never heard of any old man named George," he said. "I was here a couple of days ago after 9 p.m., and I spoke with both Sally and—" I began, but Mark cut me off with a short laugh. "What are you talking about?" he asked. Sally chimed in with a grin. "Now I know you're messing with us. We close at 8:30 p.m. sharp. No one's here after 9. I didn't say a word, just stood there in stunned silence, the image of George standing under that harsh, buzzing light, licking the side of his mouth, stuck in my mind. "Nice try, pal," Mark said. "But if you're not buying anything, could you please leave? I've got work to do and don't have time for jokes." Sally gave me a little shrug, as if to say, "Sorry, nice try." I turned to walk away, but Mark called after me. "Wait. There is one George the First now." "Mark, come on," Sally laughed. "That's not who he's talking about." "Well, maybe it is," Mark replied, exchanging an amused glance with her as if they shared some private joke. "Come on," he said, gesturing for me to follow as he led me to the back of the gas station. He pulled out a key, unlocking a door that led to a storage room stacked with soda cases, snacks, and other supplies. "There he is," Mark said, pointing to the back of the room. Standing there was a mannequin dressed in an old gas station attendant's uniform, with a name tag that read, "Hello, my name is George." Its face was frozen in a blank stare, like most mannequins, except that there was a faint discoloration at the corner of its mouth, as if someone had scratched or licked the plastic, leaving it faded and worn. "This the guy you're looking for?" Mark asked, chuckling and putting an arm around the mannequin. Behind me, I could hear Sally laughing from the counter. "Mark, stop it," she called, still amused. "Good one," I said flatly, not taking my eyes off the mannequin. Its head was tilted to the side, as if something interesting had caught its eye in the corner of the room. Mark noticed my serious expression, and his grin faded slightly as he dropped his arm from the mannequin. "Yeah, well, I've got work to do," he muttered, brushing past me. "So, get lost." I made my way out of the storage room, but just before Mark closed the door, I looked back. The mannequin wasn't staring off to the side anymore. It was looking straight at me,